World leaders meeting on climate change have until the end of today to decide what to do in 2012. That is when the Kyoto Protocol expires. But there is little agreement on whether the game plan to curb emissions signed 10 years ago has even worked. We talked with Alan Oxley, the chairman of World Growth. He was a critic of the protocol from day one, and he told Sri Jagarajah why the next blueprint cannot be built on the Kyoto framework.
I don't think you can work within the framework because the Kyoto framework carries the idea of the world setting one single mandatory target to cut emissions. That won't be agreed. The United States won't agree to that and China won't agree to that. So what we need is an approach in which all the major emitters can set out a program to deal with emissions which meets their national circumstances. Maybe we need to do it on a rolling basis, set out a program for 10 years, revise that, come back 10 years and revise that. But if we don't have a model in which every country can comfortably address climate change in a way that meets its own national economic imperatives, we won't get consensus.
So you're calling for a multi-track approach?
Yes, we call it multi-track. And that would make room. If the Europeans want mandatory targets, they can. If China instead wants to concentrate on greater energy efficiency, it can.
Let's talk about caps on emissions. Should it be voluntary or should it be binding targets?
I'd wonder, should we have caps at all as an idea that every country should subscribe to? What countries can do in their own national administrations is their business. Nationally, countries can have binding caps, but it's unrealistic to think about a global binding cap. Voluntary cap can be an aspirational goal which countries could aspire to, within which they would seek to take actions to reduce emissions. That would be useful, but again, it precludes other possibilities such as new technologies or greater efficiencies, which is what can deliver benefits for a number of developing countries.
Now, we were talking about how China is going to overtake the US as the biggest emitter in 2030. And you've advocated that China should switch to new technology to curb emissions. Who would foot the bill in that case? Would it be the government or would it be businesses?
China's not short of capital. We're seeing an extraordinary example of capital accretion in what may turn out to be one of the world's biggest economies. China has to build plenty of new power stations. It could afford them. So this is one instance where that if we envisaged that in the future China bought modern technologies with low emissions, they'd build power stations which had much lower rates of emission of carbon dioxide than we see now. So for China it's quite practical, and I think our experience, if you think about growth, has shown that it's the private sector which has got to be the primary tool, that engine to build growth. Governments aren't so good at it.
In a post-2012 Kyoto framework, what do you envisage the role of carbon credits trading to be?
It can be a tool to be used inside national administrations. The community will try and make it work on a regional basis, but it can't work globally. To have global emissions trading, you need all countries to agree to a single global cap. We won't get that.
Right now, the corporate sector is saying that trade in carbon credits isn't profitable enough. How would you incentivise that? How would you make it profitable?
The only way to make it profitable is to slow growth. You get permits to trade when there's a limit on permits. You limit permits by restricting energy. It's not a good deal for economies, I don't think.
Alan Oxley, there, chairman of World Growth, talking to CNBC's Sri Jagarajah at the UN Climate Change Conference underway in Bali, the Indonesian resort island.